Hey, how's it going? I'm Christopher Pies, and I've been a C++ software engineer now for about 19 years. I wanted to continue this series that I haven't touched for quite a while, but we were talking about automating the setup of a development environment, making it uniform for all developers to where they're all using the same tools, the same operating system, etc. This is going to build on the previous talk that I did where we set up a Docker container. And now we're going to explore the dev container, which is a concept that VS Code introduced. I think you can do it in multiple different IDEs now. You'll need an extension to make this work. If you go get the DevContainers extension published by Microsoft, that's what makes all the magic happen. Once you've got that, you can go get my repo that we have previously dealt with. What I did was, instead of make a new repo for this, I just made a branch. So you'll see that I put some notes on the README here. I'm going to make some branches, make this more complicated. Go up here, we'll switch to the DevContainer CPP branch. And in there, you'll find all the files I'm talking about in this video and follow along. So the first thing I really want to do after I get the repo is open up my Docker for Desktop and make sure that any containers or images or volumes that had been created from my previous iterations on this branch are gone. If you had followed along with a previous tutorial, this name hasn't changed. So the volumes, the name hasn't changed. It's going to clash with the new ones that it's trying to make. And so much configuration has changed that it's probably not going to work very well. We'll go ahead and delete these. Close my folder as well. I'll just close the whole thing. Close all the things. I can just check this checky box here. I'm going to keep these Ubuntu images. This is the operating system image that it's building over or on top of. So you got the Ubuntu Noble and the Ubuntu Jammy. I'm going to delete the actual images that were built on top of those and keep the Ubuntu images. And here, I'll get rid of these. And we should be good. We've got no containers, the images are gone, my volumes are gone. Everything looks like it's in good shape. All right, so I've got VS Code open. First thing I want to do is make sure I got the extension installed. I've got the DevContainers extension installed here, along with all my C++ stuff. Keep in mind, this is a host machine I'm looking at. I'm going to go ahead and open the repo that I pulled on the host machine just to look at it for a second. So let me navigate to the directory on my host machine where I had put it. I'll open the folder. And you're going to notice a difference between when we open this on the host and in the container, that on the host, you see the dev container folder. This is where all the files are that dictate how we're going to build the dev container. I've got 3 files in here. I've got the dev container JSON, I've got a Docker compose YAML, and I've got a Docker file. This Docker file is much like the one that we already went through in the previous video. In fact, I think it's just a copy-paste edit of that one. You can see I install all my dev tools here. I'm built on top of this Ubuntu image. We're getting the latest CMake. We're installing Python. We're making a virtual environment for it. That might be new. I'm installing Conan in that virtual Python environment. And then I'm making a user and making a few directories for them. And that's really all that's to this Docker file. If we look at the Docker compose file, this is where we can make multiple containers if we like. Right now, I'm just making it one to keep it simple. Maybe later I'll add another one where we have a database and another container that runs in parallel with our development container, and maybe we can write some code and interact with the database. But for right now, we just have this one container. I'm going to create the image based on the Docker file. and name it this. And then we build a container and we name it that. Here, we're creating a volume. This is referring to this lower bit here. So I'm making a volume and calling it the dev environment CPP jammy x86-64 build directory. And that's what will appear in the Docker for Desktop under the volumes. And we'll look at that after we actually get the container built. But I'm referring it to as build directory here. Up here, I say I want to map this build directory to /build. So in the container, I'll have /build, and that will be this volume that I created. I am also mapping relative to directories up from here. So that goes up DevContainer up to my root folder. I'm mapping that to /workspace. So in my container, /workspace will point to the root of my project. And we've also got this DevContainer JSON. This is the file that's specific to the DevContainer working in VS Code. And this is going to tell VS Code the various things it needs to know about our DevContainer. And the first of which is, hey, go look at the Docker Compose YAML that we just went over. We'll name it here, looks at the YAML file. I'm going to name the app that the DevContainer is representing. This could be anything. Here's the workspace folder. So this is where VS Code is going to look in order to start doing the CMake configure once the DevContainer's up. Here I've got some VS Code settings. An important one might be the CMake parallel jobs. So I can give the different extensions that I have specific settings, and it's going to configure those in my DevContainer. Excuse me, ran out of breath. In my DevContainer for me. Here I'm telling it which extensions to install. So once this brings up the DevContainer, it'll install these extensions inside that DevContainer. So I think we're ready to go ahead and bring the DevContainer up and take a look at what all the hubbub is all about. So I'm going to open the command palette here. I'm going to say open folder in container, and then I'm going to point once again to the folder where my repo is. VS Code's going to recognize that there's this DevContainer folder in there, and it's going to go through those files that we had just gone over. So the first thing it wants me to do, it sees that, hey, I've got two folders underneath the DevContainer. I can choose one of two options here. So I'm going to choose jammy. And here we go. It's starting to build our Docker container. Go ahead and make this a little bit bigger. The first time it's going to take a while because it's going to have to pull the images and build them. But looks like it already finished. So this error that comes up, this is expected. And the reason for this error is I'm trying to use Conan, and because my CMake is set up to be dependent on Conan being there, you can see I'm looking for this Conan toolchain CMake, and that gets created by the Conan install. That since that didn't run yet, that CMake that it's looking for isn't there. This will only happen the very first time you build the DevContainer, unless you blow away that volume, or you have to rebuild the container. I tried to automate this. What really needs to happen is the things that I put in this script right here. So whenever you first configure your project, you're going to need to activate that virtual Python environment so that Conan's available. Then we create a Conan profile. Here I'm just auto creating a profile and letting Conan detect the operating system, what ABI it needs, my compiler version, all that jazz. It's just going to auto detect it for me. And then here I'm telling it to go to that root directory. And from the root directory, this is the important bit. And I think I went over this in the previous video. To get the Conan dependencies, you have to issue the Conan install, which is going to read Conan file text And here I've got my dependencies listed. In this case, I'm just saying, go get gtest, go get benchmark. I was getting boost, but I decided we probably don't want to wait an hour for it to go get and build boost in this video. So you can uncomment that if you want boost. But yeah, back to the error. So because this file isn't there, and in order for that file to get there, we need to run this conan install, you're going to get an error. So I tried to automate this a number of ways. I know there's an entry point that you can put in the Docker file itself, and that would say, go run this as soon as the container is built. There was also a post command available. I think it was in the YAML file, but I'm not sure if it was the YAML or the JSON. And that was similar. Go run these things on the command line after the container is ready. The problem was that despite both of those things being run after the container is ready, in parallel, while those were being run, VS Code will still try to configure CMake. I don't see any way, I haven't come across it. If you know, leave me a comment, to tell VS Code, don't try to configure the project until these commands are completed after my Docker file is done. When the Docker container is ready, that's not your signal to go configure. Wait until I go do this other script. It just won't wait. It tries to configure right away, and it's running that entry point or the post command in parallel alongside it. So you get the error either way. So what I decided to do was just separate out the conan install and then require the user to just run it manually, like so. One thing I could have done was just bake it into the image. And what that would mean is go to the dev container, go here, go Docker file, and put it inside of here. The problem with that is I'm mounting this build directory, and that's where all the conan files are going to go. If I wanted to use a file system that was tied to the container and not mount the build directory, then it would have been possible to issue those commands in the Docker file itself and have the conan dependencies installed as it's building the Docker file. I didn't want to do that. I want to keep the build directory separate, and I want to map it. So I opted to go this other route where you just have to run it manually. But anywho, if we ignore the fact that there's an error, as a new hire at a company, all I've got to do is open the repo and issue this open folder and container, go and navigate to the root directory of the repo that I pulled and get, wait for the Docker container to be built, and then issue this command. So we've got one command rather than a list of all kinds of hoops that you got to jump through that they're going to be completely lost on. I think that's a huge improvement. Have, an environment that everybody is using that's the same, with the same tools, the same compiler, the same operating system. Issue one command and you're building and running the project. I think that almost wraps up everything that needs to be said about DevContainer with VS Code. Oh, there's one more thing. I wanted to go over this conan install. You might notice I've got this build missing. I think I had previously made the claim that, hey, Conan's just going to go get binaries for the combination of operating system, compiler, ABI, all that jazz. It's going to figure that out, go get the precompiled binary for you, cache it, and you're good to go. That's not always the case. If I use this build missing, if I go and try to get a precompiled binary and it doesn't exist, then I can build the source for my environment. And that's what this build missing flag is going to do. I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate that. Let me find my conan file. And I'm going to go ahead and spend an hour of my day and install the boost dependency. So we'll just go back to bash. And I'm going to run this. And we're going to see it's going and grabbing boost, it's going through the bzip, and it's building me the boost libraries now. This is definitely not pre-compiled binary. So this will take a while, and I'll go ahead and end the video there. But yeah, that's it. Dev containers, they're wonderful.